You are listening to Supplement Source, the official podcast of the Council for Responsible Nutrition. And now, your host, Jeff Ventura.
Hello, and thank you for listening to Supplement Source. I am your host, Jeff Ventura, the VP of Communications at the Council for Responsible Nutrition. I am so excited. I'm joined today by Yasmeen Nkrumah-Elie. She is the Global Director for External Research at Chromadex. She also happens to be the Trailblazing Woman from our 2024 CRN Convergence Conference. Hello, Yasmeen. How are you?
Oh, Jeff, it is so wonderful to speak to you today. I am great. Thank you. And how are you?
Oh, I am good. You're actually phoning in on election day. By the time people listen to this podcast, they'll probably know how that all turned out. So we unfortunately cannot get in our hot tub time machine and find out. we have to wait in real time. But in the meantime, while we wait, I want to talk to you about this award and really about what it means to you, and broadly, I'd love to talk about women in the industry. So let's start first. When you heard that you were nominated, what were your thoughts?
I actually could not believe it. There was a few people who had reached out to me and asked if they could nominate me, and I actually said no. And the reason for that was because I've only been in industry for a few years, even though I was in academia for a while and doing the work that helps support our industry. I just didn't feel like I had been here long enough. And when I thought of trailblazers, I thought of women who've been in the industry for 30 years, who, helped get DSHEA passed and things along that line. But to have more than one person actually nominate me and to see me in a light that I didn't necessarily see myself has been very, very humbling. I had to just take a step back and say, what a gift that God could give us to see ourselves as others see us, which is what my mom used to say to me all the time.
That's beautiful, yeah.
So I feel like, okay, I have this role and people see me this way, then I need to walk in this light, and I need to make sure that I am paying it forward and giving back as much as possible now that I have this new recognition.
It sounds like part of that sort of self-awareness you're talking about is recognizing that folks who are coming into the industry, who are perhaps younger than you, younger women, you sort of realize at a certain point, I think professionally, that you're, a mentor to people, and that you're setting an example, and that people are actually looking to you for professional advice or wisdom, or how you go about a particular strategy or whatever. Is that a rewarding feeling to know that you're somebody, you've grown professionally into someone that sort of falls into those shoes?
Absolutely. And I am formally mentoring 5 amazing women all over the United States right now.
Oh, my goodness.
To see them thrive has been such a joy. 2 of them recently have full-time positions in industry after, kind of wanting to be in academia, but seeing me as a role model, seeing, and learning from my story. They landed 2 really great positions, and I'm very, very excited for them. I couldn't be more happy. I was like screaming and yelling. Both of them.
That's great.
And being a mentor is one of the greatest gifts, whether it's formal or informal. And being able to plant a seed to help someone grow, to see their own greatness, is phenomenal, and is part of the reason why I believe we're all on this earth.
I think it's so interesting because there's different perceptions. I'm of an age where, I'm old enough to remember that feminism, was almost a very different construct for a lot of people, and that it was sort of like considered something you did on college campuses, and you'd protest. You think of the Gloria Steinem and that sort of era, and then it seems like we've kind of moved now. The internet, I think, has changed a lot in terms of perception, but we've moved into sort of another era, and And this era has, I think, a lot to do with the not getting the word out, but actually like where the rubber meets the road, right? Like, I mean, it actually empowering women in the workplace. Like, and what does that look like? What does that sound like? How do we define that, as a sort of collective, society? What is your thoughts on that? I mean, what does it mean? What does it mean now, this, to be honored as a woman professionally?
It's quite an honor. And when I look at who I am and what I stand for me, I've been Black first, and I've been a woman. But being a woman, particularly in this industry, is so important because our voices are just now really starting to get heard. This is the decade of women. And finally, after thousands and thousands of years, this is the decade of women. And what does that mean? And it means that women are here to define who we are and how we want to be seen and where we want to go. And we're not willing to let others put limitations on our futures. And so in our supplement industry, in our functional food industry, that means that we are joining organizations such as Women in Nutraceuticals that are helping elevate women within the industry. That means that we're advancing the science that's studying and including women in all stages of life. At developing our products. I mean, we should not be excluding women because of differences in our biology. And this has been done for hundreds of years, or we've only been used as models, by particular scientists that were conducting research that was unethical. And so now it's a time to say there's a right for women to be included in all aspects of this process. And I'm glad to be a voice for that. I'm glad to encourage others to be doing the same.
It's so interesting that you say that, because I was just talking, as I mentioned before we went live, or we started recording, that I was talking to Dr. Alyssa Dweck, who is the chief medical officer for Bonafide Health. And we were talking about menopause supplements. And she said, one of the issues that has kind of dogged the industry around these products is, when they go to do the research, they've traditionally looked at us like, we're little men, and like, we're not little men, like we're we're women. We have different physiology. We have, we deserve to be, studied as women and be included in this research as women, which is, it was sort of interesting the way she put it, where she said, we're not little men. I thought that was a very astute way of putting it, You talked about limitations, and I just, have you experienced limitations in your, because sometimes this stuff is so subtle, it's not like somebody, kind of said, you're a woman, so you're not getting promoted. I mean, it's sometimes it's a very subtle thing where it has to do with, does someone pay attention to your perspective, or is your strategy listened to? Or, I mean, can you walk me through that? Have you felt limited at all in your career?
I've definitely had some experiences of microaggressions, for sure. In graduate school, I was a wife, and I became a mother of two amazing young men while I was in graduate school. And I remember very vividly having someone in leadership at the university pull me aside and let me know that I was making some choices that they didn't agree upon by having children as in graduate. And that they were concerned of what type of example I was setting. And it has been so amazing to continue to set this example. Let me tell you that. When I was in my postdoctoral training, I had ideas and was initiating a program. And, walking into a room where it was, that I organized particular meetings, and being overlooked and not seen as the person that would be leading these efforts. And in my mind, various reasons why that may be, from the color of my skin to the fact that I was a woman to the fact that I was younger at the time than I was, not being seen as an authority. And so feeling like I've had to prove myself in so many different spaces. But one of the things that I truly love about the company that I'm with, Chromadex, is that I walked into my interview and was 100% my authentic self. And I've been accepted for who I am and what I stand for every single day that I've been in the company. And I appreciate that for me, and I appreciate that for everyone who works for Chromadex, that we can be who we are. We can have our own values, and they may be different. We can have our own opinions, our own religions, our own walks, and we're embracing and celebrating all of that. So it's wonderful to be somewhere where I'm celebrated and not just tolerated.
It's so interesting that you say that, because, so many, I think, companies know enough to sort of put this in their, corporate social responsibility pages on their website. And, people know, sort of what this is, out of the box. But to live it, to actually live it as a company ethos, and to make a new employee like yourself, experience that feeling of belonging, and, equity, right away. You just kind of know it. It's like in their DNA. That's really where the achievements start to happen.
I absolutely agree. And it's not that it's not a challenge, and there's not some hiccups along the way and opportunities for growth for everyone. But it is amazing to feel that way. It is amazing to feel like I can be exactly who I am. When things were happening around, 2020, and I started to present myself as a voice for women, a voice for African Americans, a voice for the community, for underserved, for intentionally marginalized groups. I was so worried that I would lose my job. And I was so grateful when people encouraged me and put me in places. My mentor and my boss, Andrew Shao, was like, "You can say this at the NBJ meeting." And I was like, really? I can talk about these things. I can talk about these things with Steve Mister and pull his coattails and have these conversations and be listened to. And I think that's unique about our industry. I don't know that industries took that perspective. And I question how many industries are continuing to take that perspective and want to hear everyone's voice and support not only their employees, but also their consumers, and the diversity and the beauty in the diversity that we have in America and in the world.
It's funny, you have to wonder if, the supplement industry, having sort of, come into its own as a marginalized industry somehow relates in a way, that our roots are, of an industry that came up, from its bootstraps kind of thing. And if there's somehow, more of an attention to that because of the way that, the industry's kind of come together. I'd like to think that that's the case, that it is more welcoming, and more diverse maybe than a lot of other sectors. Let's talk about you for a second, because you talk about your authentic self. I don't know anything about you, honestly. I mean, aside from the press release that crossed my desk and I said, looks fine. How did you start out? So you told me a little bit about grad school and about being a mom, but take me a little further back. How did you get interested in your field?
Yeah, so interesting enough, I went to Florida A&M University and had a NASA scholarship and eventually a presidential scholarship to be an engineer. I never had plans to be an engineer, but it paid for school for me. And so that's what I did. But I was not in love with engineering. Not that I have anything against engineering. It just was not a passion for me. And so after I graduated with my bachelor's degree, my mom sent me to Ghana, West Africa, which is one of our ancestral homes, to spend some time with some family friends and figure out who I wanted to be. And while I was there, I had the opportunity to study under a medicine man and an Nkrumah-Elie, who was a chief over chiefs. And they shared a lot about ethnobiology, about natural medicine, about herbs. Mm-hmm. And we would do these walks, and go into these different areas. They'd ask me if I knew this plant or this plant. And I honestly didn't know them. I didn't take botany, and it wasn't a priority for me growing up. And so they were just shocked, and they'd bring over like a 3-year-old child and ask about this plant. The child would tell me what it was. And so I said, oh my goodness, there's so much that I'm missing in the world that others, it's just a part of who they are.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, when I was there, the medicine man, he talked about how he couldn't cure CARs. And for a couple of days, this really stumped me. And then one day I realized he was talking about asthma. So he wasn't trying to be a mechanic. He was talking about some of the illnesses that were coming in his area, in a traditional area, where there was an introduction of CARs and there was not the same type of regulation.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So traditional area, not the enforcement on these regulations, and people were starting to get sick. And so it inspired me to actually study toxicology. And that's what I have my PhD in. I went back to Florida A&M, proud HBCU graduate, 2X, and studied toxicology. And while I was there, looked at garlic organosulfide compounds and their role.
As one does.
Of course, right? Studied garlic and how can it inhibit the initiation of cancer. I knew I wanted to continue on this path and figuring out ways that we could utilize nutrition to inhibit diseases early. And how do we get involved with prevention? And in pharma, prevention isn't the number one strategy, but in the supplement industry, that's part of what we're talking about. And so it led me to say, this is where I want to be. I want to be in an industry where we're truly trying to help people and prevent diseases early and as early as possible. And so went on to do, toxicology and nutrition at Oregon State University, eventually went to University of Colorado to continue doing research there. And while I was at University of Colorado, it dawned on me and my mentor that academia may not be the best place for me. And part of that was because I wanted to have a greater influence faster.
Yeah.
It could take a long time.
Listen, I worked at NIH, so you don't have to tell me about academia.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And so my position ended there, unfortunately, really abruptly. And I went through about 18 months of figuring out who I was. And during that period of time, I was a DoorDash driver, not to shout one way or the other, but, I was teaching dance. And I had to figure out, who am I besides just a scientist? And that was hard. I went through a deep depression because I had only seen myself as a scientist. But this helped me realize that I had some additional gifts that I could use and that I could share with the world. And so during that 18 months of basically climbing out of a negative hole and starting to see the light, once I figured out how I could get into industry, and part of it was networking, part of it was being able to communicate what I did in academia and how it would be beneficial to industry, doors started opening, and Chromadex opened the widest door for me and was able to walk through.
You dashed through that door.
I've been running. I've been trailblazing is the best I can.
I have this imagination of you delivering some kind of food with garlic on it, and you explaining to the people the cancer, the benefits of the garlic on a molecular level. I can appreciate that.
Yes, no one cares when you're delivering DoorDash what your other jobs are.
Yeah. No, listen, it's, but you put these sort of names on these programs like the Trailblazing, but you have a story that, it really does sound like you blazed a trail. There was, you kind of cut through to where you want. I was just watching, I don't know where I heard this, but they were saying that the saying is dreams don't have a deadline, which I really love that. Have you ever heard that? It's the first time I had heard that, and I just thought, it's no matter where you are in your career, it's never too late to have that sort of door opened up, right? And so it's nice to hear your story, and that it's really kind of inspiring when you think about it.
Thank you. And I do my best to share this with other people in academia as much as possible, to go to universities, to talk to students, because there's so much to learn from the mistakes that I made. And I want to help as many people as I can not make those same mistakes. So they're not, delivering food or having to do some of these hustle positions and hustle jobs in various spaces.
But sometimes though, right, don't you think? Sometimes it's that hustling that is the catalyst for reinvention. I mean, I feel like, you know, I don't know. I God knows I've had those hustle gigs myself, and you know, you go through that process, and then at least in my case, it helped me more clearly define where I wanted to be. Versus, because you know, you only know, like, you truly know where you want to be when you're where you're not. You know what I mean?
That is true. Yeah. It definitely helped in some of those ways, and it helped me realize who I was. I was a part-time lab manager even for Drosophila, which is a fruit fly lab, you know, as well, and had a friend who was like, I can't really pay you much. I could basically pay you a little bit over minimum wage, but at least you can get in here and do some science. And so also, you know, I had an opportunity to see the people in my network that really loved me, mm-hmm. and that were willing to put their neck out for me to help me succeed. And so much to give back, and so much to be grateful for.
Well, I'm grateful that you were able to join us today on this episode. Yasmeen, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on a Supplement Source and sharing actually the narrative of your trailblazing, which I think people will find fascinating. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. It's been a true pleasure.